my side. Good morning. Thank you for being here today. Your presence on Sundays continues to be a blessing to me and to this congregation, especially on days that have the potential to be lazy and rainy. A day when, on top of that, you have forfeited an hour of sleep due to the springing forward of daylight savings time. So thank you for being here as often as you can. And I sincerely hope you choosing to be here in this place with these people is a blessing to you as well. We are a people who, I think, walk a fine line. We are an open people, open to new ideas and open to things that may be different from our own experiences. But we are also a people who will not just take things at face value. The responsive reading we used this morning is one of my favorites. It reminds us to cherish our doubts. The reading prompts us to remember that truth can withstand closer inspection, that no matter the source, you and I would do well to be a little skeptical most of the time. Whether the message comes from an unwanted solicitor on the telephone to the relative asking for just one more loan. Sometimes it pays to have your guard up just a little bit. Additionally, it does not matter if it is a teacher or a minister or a news source or your government. It is best to maintain a bit of doubt, a little bit of skepticism, and to check sources, if at all possible. I do not often quote Ronald Reagan, but I think it was Reagan who said, "Trust but verify." And we do want to trust. In fact, you and I have often given the benefit of the doubt, and we do so as often as we can in order to build trust. But perhaps it is by being skeptical, by being doubtful, that we can save us a little heartache and even embarrassment at times. Now, personally, I don't want to go through life distrustful of all things and all people. But I also do not want to be taken advantage of or duped. It is, it seems to me, a very fine line to walk. Now, for some people, like attorneys, it is sometimes their job to create reasonable doubt, right? So there's a story about a defendant who was on trial for murder. There was very strong evidence indicating guilt, but no corpse had been found. In the defense's closing statements, the lawyer, knowing that his client would probably be convicted, decided to try a trick. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I have a surprise for you all," the lawyer said as he looked at his watch. "Within 1 minute, the person presumed dead in this case will walk into the courtroom." He looked toward the courtroom door, and the jurors, somewhat stunned, all looked eagerly at the door. A minute passed. Nothing happened. Finally, the lawyer said, "Actually, I made up the previous statement, but you all looked on with anticipation. I therefore put it to you that there is reasonable doubt in this case as to whether anyone was killed, and insist that you return a verdict of not guilty." With that, the jury retired to deliberate, but after only a few minutes, they came back and pronounced a verdict of guilty. "But how?" the lawyer asked. "You must have had some doubt. I saw all of you stare at the door." "Oh yes," the jury foreman replied. "We all looked, but your client did not." When I was studying the art of counseling, and I do believe it to be an art rather than anything near a science, though it can certainly be based upon social science research. But anyway, while I was studying, I was hesitant to align myself with any therapeutic theory. I balked at the idea of calling myself an Adlerian, or a person-centered Rogerian, or a Gestalt therapist, or by any of the other modalities I was learning about in graduate school. I tended to see the benefit in pieces of each of the theoretical models and preferred for a long time to think of my approach as eclectic. However, there did come a time as I continued my studies when I began to learn more about rational emotive behavior therapy, and in it, I found something that began to ground my clinical work. Working out of a theory began to give me more of a definite set of skills and techniques that allowed me to help clients in a more consistent manner. Yet this grounding did not entirely eliminate my use of other approaches. I might use a Gestalt technique once in a while. I might reflect like a Rogerian because I believed it was helpful, all the while still remaining based in REBT. Now, just as an aside, I will either remind you or let you in on something not as often discussed, and that is that your relationship with a therapist is more important than the therapist's theoretical orientation. If you have a good rapport with your therapist, you have great potential in creating change in your life. So don't leave a therapist because she challenges you too much, but do leave if the relationship is just not there. But counseling out of grounding in rational emotive behavior therapy helped me, and it seemed to help my clients. At the same time, I did not confuse the orientation with an ideology, or more specifically, a dogma. My understanding of a dogma is that these are principles brought forth by an authority and are believed to be incontrovertibly true. And while I never personally met the creator of REBT, Albert Ellis, he certainly was an authority in his own mind and in others. But I would be very hesitant to latch onto the idea that Ellis or REBT was incontrovertibly true. The very nature of my supplementation with other theoretical tools admitted that one size did not fit all, and it left me with a healthy dose of doubt. That although I found something that worked well, it did not necessarily mean that approach always worked in every situation for everybody. And yet we see this same kind of latching behavior, this unbendable reaction everywhere we look if we are the least bit cognizant of what to look for. When an ideology has become incontrovertibly true, we have in all likelihood begun to lose our ability to doubt, our ability to ask important questions, where it is no longer providing the grounding or an overview, but the dogma itself becomes the truth, the answer to all the questions, and we no longer have even a semblance of doubt. No matter our theological or political or institutional connection, there is the possibility we can discontinue our doubt, and that does not always serve us very well. The fine line we walk between doubt and cynicism can become blurred and faded. Because there are some who have stopped doubting and who only put forth their ideology, their dogma. And if they are organized well enough or have the connections required to make their voice bigger than it really is, then we are left with things that sting us as a culture, as a society. That is where, to me, creating doubt in others can almost look and feel evil. So here in Texas, we have a group of people who are very well organized and who claim to believe the earth is a little over 6,000 years old and was created in 6 physical days, and then God rested on the 7th. These individuals retain a belief in the inerrant Word of God as written in the Bible. Now, I don't really care that someone believes this, that the earth is only 6,000 years old, despite the scientific consensus that there is no possible way this could be true. Others can believe whatever they want. What becomes difficult to me is when these people believe their viewpoint, based upon dogma, should be considered by everyone. They do not trust the scientific knowledge, and they would prefer that we all pay attention to their point of view and make sure it receives equal time to others in the classroom, creating doubt of evolution because it works against their dogma. Now, this idea of giving equal time to others seems worthwhile initially. It seems fair. In fact, it has roots in something called the fairness doctrine. And who among us would say out loud that we are against the idea of fairness? Fairness is something we admire, something we constantly wish were true. The fairness doctrine was introduced by the Federal Communications Commission in 1949. It was revoked in 2011. But it required broadcasters to give equal time to both sides of controversial issues. In this way, people could hear both sides of an idea or story and make up their own minds. The media outlet, for its part, would do its best to remain impartial for the story. Now, this idea of fairness in a country with 2 political parties makes some sense. If we hear from only one party who has all the money to purchase media exposure, the citizens of this country would suffer from not hearing the other point of view. But there comes a time, I think, when it is no longer fair to pretend a point of view is vital. For the most part, it is rare that we would give equal time to a racist or to a misogynist. There comes a time when bad ideas, bad dogma, should no longer receive equal time. And that is a fine line we walk. Because we can be confused when we contrast this idea of fairness with the idea that you and I have heard time and again, to never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. That idea is attributed to Margaret Mead, the cultural anthropologist who studied at Barnard College and Columbia University. Now, I don't really know if Mead said this, but it is one of those things that ring true. It goes along with what we know about Margaret Mead. And we have all probably witnessed where a small group has made enough positive noise that the larger society listens. And we like to think about the good things that have come about through this process, as no doubt Margaret Mead would have liked to. Yet at the same time, while we celebrate the idea of all having a voice, we also see small voices that hold the rest of us hostage. We see people who want to give equal time to things that hurt us as a society today. So we must walk that line of doubt and trust, because it hurts us and it hurts our children to believe the world may have been created in 6 days. This is inaccurate and demeans real science. And in the past, we've had people who denied acid rain and who have denied climate change and the hole in the ozone. They have argued against the real dangers of DDT. These are paid doubters who are used to create confusion in the mind of the public. And nowhere is this more clear than when a small group of scientists got their start in creating doubt. They set the stage in their ideas surrounding the the science of the harmful effects of cigarette smoking, and then later on, secondhand smoke. The campaign instituted by the tobacco company, using contrarian scientists, created enough doubt that for a long time, much longer than ever necessary, people continued to wonder if the science was conclusive. But it was. The science was conclusive that smoking hurt our bodies, hurt our health. And it had been conclusive for a long time. But people who were hired by the tobacco lobby were hired to create doubt in the masses. And unfortunately, they did their job well. And when the jury appeared to still be out on the causes of lung and other cancers, the tobacco industry continued to earn unprecedented profits. In a book titled Merchants of Doubt, How a Handful of Scientists Obscured the Truth on Issues from Tobacco Smoke to Global Warming, the authors, who are historians, document how the creation of doubt in many circumstances has little to do with science, but has everything to do with dogmatic ideology, with an unyielding view of the world in which all else is secondary. These people do not have an eclectic view at all, but one that is rooted very deeply in a singular ideology. This handful of scientists the authors speak of had at one time played a prominent role in the Cold War. They were most often physicists, scientists who were involved in creating the deterrents that presented doubt in other countries as to the viability of nuclear war. And there is no doubt that physicists are most often very intelligent people. But with apologies to any physicists here in the room today, they do not know everything. Even when they are connected to institutional think tanks, to generals, and even to presidents, they do not know everything. In the fight for public approval, you might have a physicist talking about health issues when it comes to smoking, or a climatic change issue when climatology is not that person's specialty, and so on. They were respected scientists, even if they were speaking out of their expertise, and they were connected to the highest levels of power in Washington, D.C. So what the authors of Merchants of Doubt tell us is that these scientists were so very tied not to their science, but to the idea that capitalism was the answer to all of our ills, even things like smoking, like acid rain, and like global warming. That the costs of fixing these issues were too economically great, and that the market itself should be our savior. And because of this, we lose time. We debate longer than we need to. These merchants of doubt hold us hostage, and we can suffer immensely. It is detrimental, I believe, to hold on to any ideology so tightly that we are blinded to other possibilities. So we are left walking this fine line of doubt and trust and cynicism. We have witnessed the creation of doubt for evil purposes. We have seen how our attention can be shifted away by sleight of hand techniques, and we are seemingly left to our own devices. And that may be some of the reason why this place, this church, is so important. After all, that is why most of us are here. It is because we question what we were told. We cherish our doubt. Here we are not alone. We are not left to our own devices. We can learn and be together as we attempt to figure out all that goes on around us. As others sometimes attempt to deceive us, while at the same time we know others attempt to do good. So we are required, you and I, to walk this fine line, this invisible line, knowing that too much doubt can create a worldview that is quite negative, and that not enough doubt can leave us exposed individually and societally. So do cherish your doubt, but do not make an idol of it. As our responsive reading says, therefore let us not fear doubt, but let us rejoice in its help. As we rise together in body or spirit, join in singing our closing hymn number 1, that may nothing evil cross this door. We'll sing all 4 verses.